All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So we're going to take a little break today from the vlogs and everything that's going on. I want to discuss the Hulu documentary, okay? We watched that a couple of nights ago now, and a lot of people have been, I guess, requesting a video from me, kind of just analyzing the Aaron Carter Hulu documentary. I just want to share some of my thoughts. And look at Marlowe. Marlowe bombing the video. Come on. He's got, oh my God, you got Melanie Martin. He's got Melanie Martin in his mouth. No. So anyways, the first thing I want to say about the Aaron Carter Hulu documentary, it's very, like, not superficial, but it's very top layer information, right? It doesn't go very deep into, in my opinion, what was actually going on behind the scenes with Aaron Carter. They don't really get into a lot of the stuff that I think most people who are watching the Carterverse would know about, because this is a mainstream media production. So obviously they're trying to market this documentary to a mass audience. And most people, that are probably going to see this documentary, a lot of them probably haven't seen the Carterverse stuff. So, they were interviewing people like AJ from Backstreet Boys, and AJ was kind of portrayed as like one of Aaron's best friends or something. But I'm sitting there watching AJ, and I'm like, well, where was AJ the whole time when Aaron Carter was streaming? And, it was just kind of odd to bring AJ from the Backstreet Boys. They didn't even have Nick Carter in the documentary. I guess Nick Carter maybe didn't want to be in the documentary, and so they went with AJ just to have somebody from the Backstreet Boys representing, on this documentary. They also interviewed Melanie Martin. Now, obviously, Melanie Martin is one of the main characters in the Carterverse, off and on, and then he ended up having a kid with her. The whole thing with Melanie Martin is really, a lot of people think she's just straight up evil. I'm not sure about that. There's a lot of, stop biting my toes. There's a lot of stories and stuff about, what happened with their relationship. And it's really hard to tell what's real. From the documentary, it seems like, she she's portrayed in a very positive light. They don't really get into the escort, the sex work, any of that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, because it's a mainstream media production, they're trying to make, I guess, her look, halfway decent. So they don't really get into any of that. But that was obviously an issue, and I think it's probably almost most certainly that she was the one that sort of dragged Aaron into the sex work on OnlyFans, but they really didn't even, I don't even think they mentioned that in the documentary, that Aaron Carter was sticking butt plugs up inside himself for gay men on OnlyFans. I don't think they got into that at all in the documentary. And that would have been a pretty, in my opinion, that would have been pretty important. He's like a musician, an artist, a famous pop star, or former child star, whatever. Could Melanie Martin have been more supportive of the legitimate, career choices that Aaron Carter had engaged in? I think so, as opposed to dragging him into sex work. And I think he got the OnlyFans idea from Melanie Martin. But besides that, I'm really not sure Melanie Martin is evil. Like I said, there's all kinds of theories about what happened with Aaron, what happened with Melanie, but she seemed to be emotional in the documentary. It's hard to tell, but behind the, the eyelashes and the weaves and all the makeup and the plastic surgery, it's hard to really sense real emotion, behind that superficiality. But, for what it was, they portrayed her fairly well. People will agree with that. People will not agree with that. But that's how the documentary, I think, handled the Melanie Martin situation, because it is the mother of his child. And I suppose she's, I guess she's inherited something from the Carters. But then I'm hearing rumors too that Melanie Martin, it was like Melanie Martin's parents that were paying for a lot of stuff. Somebody even tried telling me they paid for the house, but I know Aaron had the house before he met Melanie Martin. So that's definitely not true. Her parents did not pay for Aaron Carter's house. Maybe they were making mortgage payments later on. I don't know, but so there's that whole thing. Let's talk about Aaron Carter's mother, Jane Carter. So they went really hard on Jane. And rightly so. But it was like they let Nick Carter off the hook. I mean, Nick Carter didn't even reconcile with his brother before his death. Wouldn't be, he wasn't featured in the documentary, and they had AJ representing the Backstreet Boys in this documentary. But with Jane, I don't think they actually interviewed Jane, but they showed a bunch of older interviews of her, and they were really putting all the blame on Jane Carter, like everything from his childhood, the reason he was so psychologically messed up, the reason he was, out of money, and the reason he, was driven to drug use later on in life. They blame it all on Jane Carter, which I think is a little bit of an oversimplification. From what I remember, because Aaron Carter did stream with his mother off and on several times, I think he was close to his mother. I think him and his mother maybe had some sort of codependency type of, relationship, or at least tendencies within the relationship. But again, to kind of, the documentary put all the blame on his mother. And I guess in childhood, like Aaron Carter's childhood, maybe that makes sense. But, is it his mother's fault that he was, using drugs at the age of, 30-something years old? Is it his mother's fault that he was, in these kind of toxic relationships with some of these women? It seems like an oversimplification to me. I think they could have talked more about the stalking and harassment that was being done to Aaron by people out, other parties besides his mother. I'm not going to get into all that right in this video, but you guys know what I'm referring to. Now, they did talk about the online bullying, I guess the gang stalking, but they didn't call it gang stalking. I wish they would have mentioned gang stalking, because that's what Aaron Carter said. He said all the time, they're gang stalking me. I mean, he even had hecklers. Well, they did talk about the harassers and the hecklers that would show up to his shows. I guess there was like a group of people that would show up to his shows just to heckle him. So they did mention that, right? But the term gang stalking was not mentioned at all. But that's essentially what it was. Now, was it, record labels that were behind this? Was it just haters on the internet? I mean, it could have been a combination of all of them. Some people think other elements within the Carter family were involved. Maybe perhaps other escorts that were married to, members of a boy band that Aaron Carter's related to. So, the online bullying, they talked about the body shaming. They talked about how, Aaron Carter really just wanted validation, just wanted to be appreciated. And, he kind of fed into the trolls and stuff. They talked about all that, which I agree with. So there was a few good elements to the documentary, but overall, I think it was very superficial. I think it was a very, it wasn't a very deep dive. They honored him in a way. They did a pretty good job at honoring him and, venerating, paying homage to his musical legacy. But as far as, an informative documentary as to what actually happened to Aaron later on in life and what happened with his passing, the documentary just doesn't get into it. And if you notice too, they have a lot of producers on there. They bring in a lot of these, big time crypto Hollywood producers that, they're on camera pretending to be like, oh yeah, I was friends with Aaron, or I really tried to help Aaron, and all this kind of, well, where were they the whole time, the Carterverse was going down? They were nowhere to be found, right? But, so I think there was some propaganda, definitely some mainstream media propaganda, some mainstream music industry propaganda in this film. So yeah, those are basically my thoughts, going hard on Jane, going too easy on Nick, bringing fucking AJ, into the documentary to represent the Backstreet, I guess to represent Nick Carter, really. and they just didn't get too deep into anything. It was just kind of a surface level synopsis of Aaron Carter's life, sort of some of his struggles with his mother. They didn't talk about the struggles he had with his brother. They didn't talk about, I mean, because we've talked about this. If you remember House of Carters, it's obvious from that video Nick Carter could be very abusive towards Aaron. We also have the video where Nick Carter throws a pie in Aaron Carter's face at one of those award shows. I think it was like a Nick's Kids Choice Award show or something. So obviously there was, some bullying going on there. They didn't even mention that. They didn't mention the stuff with Angel and so yeah, just very surface level, kind of a basic thing, but it was interesting. There were parts about it that were interesting. On a scale of let's say 1 to 10, 10 being a really great documentary, 1 being like the worst thing in the world, I'd probably give it a 4. It wasn't really good. It wasn't good enough to get a 5, but it's not quite like a 2 or a 3. I'm going to give it a 4, maybe a 4.5. So you guys let me know. Did you see the Hulu documentary? Do you agree with my analysis of it? Do you think they should have gone deeper into it, or do you think for the mass appeal on Hulu, this was appropriate? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, until next time, I'll see you on the next video.